This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. The music that I am playing, getting us started today, is called Enough. And I think if you look at the show notes and follow the link to Enough, you'll see how it really corresponds with what our podcast guest is going to talk about. Her name is Victoria Rader, and she is in Washington, D.C., a city where so much is happening. And she's a possibility coach. So if you think about the song Enough by my best friend, Jeff Brisbane, you'll see that when somebody wishes you enough, it's about finding yourself and your possibilities. And so I'm really excited to find out how you got into this, Victoria, and how you help guide people. So welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Karen. First and foremost, I gotta tell you, I had chills when you played that music. I've never heard the song, but to have you then follow up and say, we're gonna talk about this whole enough theme, because honestly, if I had to pick one word to describe so many concepts of what possibility is all about, that would be that word. So, I'm just blown away, and I want to honor your intuition and this phenomenal podcast. And so, I want to look at it from different angles and then kind of show how that ties to how I became possibility coach and what it means.
Sure.
One of humanity's greatest fears, and by humanity I mean me, Vika, Ukrainian girl who now lives and thrives in America, or anyone who's listening to it, greatest fear is that what if everybody else finds out that I'm really not enough? It's this biggest secret we're running around hiding.
You're right.
And we spend so much time suppressing that secret, right? So, yes, the beginning of all possibility is stepping into enoughness, knowing that you're enough, and into prosperity, knowing that what you have is enough, and thriving from that outward. But for me, about 2 years ago, my branding coach said, "Hey, you now kind of have semi-global presence, but you don't have like a title. We need to brand you. What what is it that you do?" And up till that point, all of my business has been built by referral. So I actually emailed my clients and I said, "Hey guys, when you refer me and our businesses to your friends, what do you actually tell them? What do you tell them?" And the answers started trickling in, and it was very emotional and humbling period in my life where the messages were different, the stories were private and different, but the theme was I didn't think it was possible for me, and now I'm here. I didn't think it was possible to get out of financial debt, and now my business has this income. I didn't think it was possible for me to be happy in my relationship, and now we're year two into a happy marriage and so forth and so on. And so I went, of course, and trademarked possibility coach and started truly leaning into it. And I think the journey of possibility for all of us is not knowing that something is possible, finding out that it is possible, believing that it's possible not just for somebody somewhere, but for me, and then making it probable, and then becoming peaceful, purposeful, passionate, and prosperous. That's in a nutshell the full journey of possibility.
It's quite interesting because as you were describing all that, probably about, my son's 32 now, so probably about 20 years ago, I was writing a blog because my son is high functioning autistic. And so many people would say, it's not possible, certain things were going to happen. And I didn't believe it. My husband didn't believe it. In fact, we always said he was a so-called neurotypical until the day he got the diagnosis. And then we all started treating him as this child and even young adult, as it turned out, with a disability. And the reality of it was not a disability. It's a true ability for him. And so when I was writing the blog, I came across a quote by Audrey Hepburn that says, "Impossible means I'm possible." And my husband and my son and I, we repeated that daily because there are those possibilities out there. And it's not up to somebody else to tell us we can't reach them. We may decide along the journey not to reach those possibilities. We may just say, that's not for me or not for me at this time. But to say that you can't get there, who's to say that until we try?
Well, absolutely. And I think that what happens is that people dissuade us from pursuit for two reasons. Actually, it's one reason that has two aspects. And that reason is fear. First, it's fear for us. People that love us don't want us to fail. They're terrified of seeing us fail, so they want to dissuade us from pursuit for the fear of failure and disappointment. And that secondary aspect is why? Because it reflects back on them, because it reflects back on their inability to have pursued. And the greatest fear yet, what if we are to succeed? Then it voids their life. It brings immense pain of realization. Wait a minute, if he or she did it, why did I not do it? So they're protecting themselves from regret while protecting us from failure. And I say, welcome failure. What a fun, luxurious opportunity it is to fail daily. As a matter of fact, if you've had a day you haven't failed, you haven't lived, you just took a break. That's okay, right? So it's failing forward, failing forward. That's, I think, the culture that we're in. It's just made a taboo to fail because it's associated us as a human being with the act of failure. But once you disassociate and you understand that we as humans grow through failure, you can have so much fun with it. My son was about 2, I think, maybe 18 months old or so. And he was sitting at the table and he was eating spaghetti with his hands, nonstop. And then he started putting it on his head. And as he put it on his head, he fell asleep. And I just remember my husband and I were just laughing our heads off, and we thought it was so cute. And I think if we are to realize that to the divine intelligence, to the source, to God, we are that cute with spaghetti on our head as we're figuring life out. We can participate in failure joyfully. I think that would be a possibility. What if it were possible to fail joyfully? Just an invitation.
As you were describing that situation with your son, I started thinking about how many of us have celebrated birthdays with our 1 and 2 year olds, and we let them get the cake all over them and all over their hands because it's their day. It's their birthday. This is your cake. And yet I remember growing up, I don't remember my first or second birthday, of course, but everything, if there was a birthday cake or something special, we were told, not to touch it. And then when we would sit down to eat, to put that napkin on our lap and, to wipe your mouth, all those things that I'm not saying they were bad to learn, but we didn't get some of the experiences that children today are allowed to get.
Mhm.
And that we can laugh with them over this spaghetti or whatever it is that they have put all over themselves because they're learning,
Mhm.
and we should be learning with them.
Yeah, I'm very convicted that we don't get children to influence them nearly as much as we get them for them to influence us.
Yeah.
I believe our growth as parents is magnified, so much more than even of the best of the influences we can have on our children. And it's beautiful because the worst of influences then are remediated,
Yeah.
I think so. Um, and another thing that from what you were saying earlier that really kind of impacted me deeply with that impossible, you know, the I am is a very powerful structure. It is powerful structure spiritually, because if you look at it spiritually, either it's in Torah and Quran or in the Bible, that is one of the names of God, which I think is so magnificent. And so to me, there is a human structure of who we are. I actually coded it into me, little m, big E. There is a mortal matter that I am. It just is. And there is material manifesting that it needs to do. It needs to eat. It needs to sleep. It's there. And yet it is moved by eternal energy that I also am, that is expanding through me, that essence so when I say I am me, I'm reminded I'm both mortal and eternal. I am both matter and energy. I am manifesting and expanding, and I'm material and I'm essential. It's very important. And this life becomes of how do I surrender my mortal to eternal? How do I surrender the little am to the big E of who I am? How do I surrender this mortality to, in a nutshell, my divinity or my spirituality, my greater self, that energy that have come here? And when you look at that impossible, there are days for all of us that because of that upbringing that we've received of restriction, right, as you were describing, you don't deserve to be happy now, put it on hold. The pretty things are not for you to enjoy right now, that we might believe it's not possible to that part of us. And I think it's important to validate it and say, well, that is true to a part of me that is scared. Instead of saying, that's not true, that's not how. Oh, no, it is. Matter by itself does not move. It moves only when the energy flows through it. So I'm going to validate my fear instead of deny it and say, I get it. There's a part of me that thinks it's completely impossible, and it's not wrong. It's just that there's a greater part of me that can make it possible. And that settles the duality. And we're no longer exhausted by numbing our humanity, but we love it. We surrender it to that drive, I would say, of our divinity, of our spirituality. And I think it's important to know we are both, and we accomplish the impossible by loving the part that it thinks it is.
Well, growing up, if I would have said the words I can't, and I know I said it a lot, my father would say to me, how do you know? What did you do to prove that you can't? And I would look at him and just say, well, I can't, and I would give reasons. I don't have the money. I don't live there. I don't know anybody else that's doing it. Whole list. And he'd go, but that doesn't mean you can't.
Mm.
Now, could you if you had those things you just listed? And in my mind, oftentimes I'd say, yeah. And he'd say, okay, so you could do it. That's better than saying, I can't.
Mhm.
He said, so put that on hold. So maybe someday you'll do that. And it was that positive reinforcement that, okay, so I can't do it right now, but it doesn't mean it won't happen someday or may not happen in another way. And one of those things happened to be um, finishing my college degree. I went away to college, and um, I didn't like the routine classes, so I took all of my major classes and actually ended up after 2 years with an associate degree. However, my parents thought I had wasted their money, and they said, "We're going to stop paying for you to go to school, If you think that associate degree works for you, great, you go use it. And in the back of my mind, I always wanted to be in communications. I always wanted to be there to guide people. And so I now had this associate degree, but I knew I really needed that bachelor's degree. And I was told by my first husband I wasn't smart enough. There was no way I was going to go back to school. All these things happened. However, I remembered something my father had said. Maybe it was not possible at that moment. Is it possible now? And my son was graduating high school. He was going away to college. And in the back of my mind, it's going to happen now. And I went back and not only completed my bachelor's, but got my master's because I was so into the learning. And that's when it really hit. Things are possible. But sometimes we need that guidance.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was always the voice of my dad. But for many others, it's going to be someone like you, Victoria, who's a coach, and you're not going to deny people what they're thinking because that's not your job. Your job is to guide.
It's fascinating because your father has naturally mastered capacity of asking a question, right? I speak a lot about the concept asking you shall receive has very little to do with order couches and cars, but frame a question in a way that will expand your awareness. And what do I mean by that? We're wired to answer a question we're asked. We cannot help but not to. So if I'm going to ask, okay, what color are you thinking about right now? Your mind will come up with a color. We both know you were not thinking about the color. So if I'm going to ask myself why I'm such a failure or what's wrong with my partner, my powerful mind is going to fill in the blanks immediately. I'm going to ask what's the best way to handle this situation, and I pause long enough, I'm going to start getting good answers. So very often when somebody comes truly stuck in this paradigm of, I just don't believe it's possible, you cannot muscle against that paradigm, but you can ask a question. What if it were possible? Very simple, very non-threatening question. I'm not saying that it's possible. I'm just questioning, and what if it were possible? What's then? What would be your next step if it were possible? And that removes that burden of failure we talked about, and it replaces it with genuine curiosity. And where there is curiosity, there's progress. So I often tell my clients and students, it's all in the question you're asking. If you can find the subconscious question that you're continually asking, you will find the answer as to why you have reality that you have right now. So start by asking, what if it were possible? What if it were possible for me? In what way is it possible for me? How can I make it probable? What's the best and highest way to make it probable today? Right? So you build up questions and you trust the process that the answers will arrive, and they always, always do.
So, what brought you to wanting to uh, work in this field? Because you must have a lot of students, clients that come to you and they're ready to make a change. At least they say they are. But then when you ask them to do some of this hard stuff, because it is hard when you have to start processing, how do you I guess what I'm asking is, do you push them to like, hey, if this is what you want, you got to do it? Or is it more like the door is open you have to take that step if that's what you want.
You know, it's both. Pushing maybe is not the word I would use, but I'm going to share with you a very deep insight I've received as a young mother, as a clueless young mother, obsessive control freak, I should say. You know, I was going to implement this beautiful practice where once a week my family would have a spiritual share in quiet atmosphere, and then we would play games and you know, my 2 and 5-year-old were not on the program for that, you know. So I mean, you know, the mother had a perfect plan for perfect parenting, you know, and children were practicing this free agency thingy that we'll talk about in coaching in a minute, you know. And I will never forget this moment where I am coming to my 2-year-old. I take him by his shoulders, I get into his face, and all of a sudden I feel this internal stop, what you doing? And I'm like, okay, hands off my kid. You know, I sit down and I have this gorgeous inside vision. If you have, I see a little plant being planted. So you plant a plant and you can scream at it, it won't grow any faster. If you pull it up, you'll uproot it and it'll dry. But what you can do, you can create the environment and consistent nourishment for it to grow. So, truly, for anyone who comes to our company, for any one of our coaches, they look at them as a tender plant that is there to grow. And we have a privilege of nourishing the ground, of providing the light, and giving the water. Those are three different aspects. You know, we look at them as mindset, skill set, and effort. Just like a plant needs dirt, water, and light, for successful coaching, a person needs shift in mindset, shift in skill set, and support in guided effort. Without the three, they fail. You know, they fail. And a lot of time a person gets frustrated or they're stuck because they are working on mindset when it's time to improve skill set. We get stuck when we're focused on a maxed capacity. So once you understand the formula for growth, that it is mindset multiplied by skill set multiplied by effort equals results, and you feel stuck, you're going to find naturally that you're probably an addict in one of those three areas and you've maxed your current capacity there. You've maxed your effort, or you've maxed your skill set, or you've maxed your mindset. And so it's continually reshifting it and equipping a client to do that. And then to go with that powerful growing theme, it's very important to know where you are. You know, it said faith is like a little seed, if planted, it grows. And I always say, okay, a person believes they're going to grow, they want to grow. Let's look at what it is to be a little seed. You're stuck in the dirt, it's dark, there's no light, it's cold, and you have to come open. You have to break open. So I often say when a client comes, they're either open or they're not. You cannot crack a seed open before they're ready. And for a lot of us, are you open? If you are, you can grow.
Well, I totally agree with that because this summer I took a 6-week training of positive intelligence. And so much of what you're talking about is part of that program. Um, you know, we would, listen to so many tapes during the week. There was reading to do. There were exercises to do. And then we'd come together as a group once a week. And I was fighting it for the first 3 weeks. I was trying to do everything I had to do, but I wasn't doing it as openly as I needed to do. And so I was suffocating, and I get that. It was like, well, I got to do this, but I don't understand why I'm doing it, but I'll do it anyways. But it wasn't until about week 4 or 5, just like that seedling, I sort of poked my head up and looked around and said, well, yeah, I can do this. Still wasn't sure why I was doing it, but I kept trying. Once the 6 weeks was over and we all agreed to go into a long-term weekly conversation, I have totally changed, and I see it in everything I do. Um, and I'm not gonna say everybody's gonna change when they come to you and wanna reach what is possible for them. But I think when we give ourselves that opportunity, that we don't have to listen to all the old tapes going on in our head. We don't have to listen to all of our friends who tell us, "Oh, you're good enough now." Again, it goes back to that song, "Enough." What is enough? I might be enough right now, but tomorrow I might wake up and I might just need a little bit more, and that's okay. And I'm assuming that's how you react to your clients, that we're really never going to reach that pinnacle because we're always going to want more.
I think there is a big difference between complacency and fulfillment. Um, and I believe that the fastest way to growth is not hunger. I know that I look at different levels of empowerment, and we cannot force growth, as we've discussed. We can nourish empowerment. So there are three levels of empowerment as I see. The first one is, I call it powerless me, and that is life happens to me. So when something happens in your life and you react to it, how could it happen? Why did it happen? It's unfair. Doesn't matter whether it's happening to you or you're reacting to what's happening globally. I'm Ukrainian. The powerless me level would be, why is it happening? How could it happen to a thriving country that is free loving? Right? How could, why are my classmates being killed? That's very powerless. It's stripping you when you
Absolutely.
look at reality. Then the next level is the level that I think Les Brown and Tony Robbins master so much. I call it hungry me, power hungry me, where you say, wait a minute, if it's happening to me, there's an aspect of it that is happening for me. In what way this thing that is happening to me is also happening for me? So then I say, wait a minute, the Ukrainian nation is being reborn. We're being unified. There is such a zeal and clarity for knowing what they want. I can see where the power hunger comes in, and you say, by golly, I'm going to be resilient. It's the virtue of resilience. I'm going to overcome. A lot of successful people that come to me are stuck at that. And then it's never enough. There's always a new mountain to climb. They're always hungry. Well, I've achieved this. I've built a $3 billion business. Now, what's next? What's next? What's next? And they continue hungry, but there's no fulfillment. There is hunger without fulfillment. It becomes an addiction to achievement without the feeling of fulfillment. That's very important to shift of powerless me to power hungry me, and you cannot skip that. But the next level is surrender to the energy of love and creation. And that comes through as, wait a minute, turns out life isn't just happening to me. Quite frankly, little ego, it's not happening just for me. How can I make life happen through me? How do I surrender to divine guidance, to that inner passion, if divine guidance is not your language, to that drive, to calling within, to have life happening through me? So for me, how am I making this happen through me? We're donating money, we're doing clothing, I'm participating. I cannot change the war. I've learned the lesson it has for me. Now that it's stuck there, how am I going to impact it through me? And so when people come into coaching, whether it is with You to Shine or with any other company, it's very important to know which level you're at. Are you at survival? Life happens to me. Are you at stability, going to success? Life happens for me. Or are you at significance? Life happens through me. The reason why is because from survival to stability is the change of habits. Brian Buffini used to say that. From stability to success is the change of mindset. And from success to the significance is the change of heart. So only you know where in each area of your life, what stage you're in. And it's very important to go to the next stage because you can be in significance in your business and in survival in your family. And
Exactly.
then you're internally confused because you're trying to apply different methodologies to different areas of your life. So notice what you notice. I say always notice what you notice because what you notice is what you create. So notice your patterns. Are you continually thinking, how could it happen to me? That's powerlessness. It's not shameful. It's just need to know that what you probably need is a change of a habit. New affirmation, new routine, new morning help, right? If you are conquering and getting educations and certifications, and I keep talk from experience, your wall is covered and yet you're feeling empty, it's time to go to, from power hunger to empowerment. That's a that's a beautiful, nourishing process. So it's knowing who to nourish in what way to their next state of growth and honoring that.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the war in Ukraine because I was going to. Um, and I know that makes many of us feel powerless. But I also loved how you talked about there are things that we can do. Um, Conversation is a big one to make sure that, you know, we don't let this continue or go on again. When they say never forget, that is an important statement. But the other things that we can do, you've talked about, sending money, clothing, food, uh, so many things. And you can be creative about it. Uh, some of us have never even been close to Ukraine, but that's where my grandparents came from, that area. And the first day that the war was announced, I realized it and I called my brothers and I said, our grandparents were from there. I had grandparents from Moscow and that part of Russia as well. And, all of a sudden you start feeling this is my war too, but I'm going to do the best that I can. I'm going to help in any way that I physically, emotionally can. And that relates to so many other things in our lives. And I'm so impressed with possibility coaching because it doesn't necessarily say, this is exactly what I'm going to do. I need this for my business. I need this for my family. No, I need this for my life. So tell my listeners how they can find you, how they can learn more about you, um, because we just touched a little bit today.
We just recorded a beautiful, absolutely free masterclass. It's a 2-hour intense value masterclass on manifesting miracles. And you can go to manifestmiracles.me, and you know why me, little M big E. I'm very big on that. So it's manifestmiracle.me, and what you'll get in those 2 hours is full 6 aspects of making a life of miracle possible for you. It has exercises, it has mind shifts. It truly takes you through a very transformative experience. It starts with the concepts of the law of resonance, both in physics and quantum physics and in metaphysics. And it teaches you that without a shortcut. You are the shortcut. That to create a life of miracles, you need to know that you are a miracle. Otherwise, it's a temporary process. So it starts with the self-worth and self-esteem and the healing of that void of I'm not enough. And then I go into 6 aspects of mindset as I see them, which is imagination, perception, imagination, intuition, reason, memory, and will. And truly, manifestmiracles.me is probably my greatest, most generous offering that I can give to anybody. Um, because what we've realized is that if somebody will not take 2 hours of free transformative experience, they're simply not our client. So we offer it. It's kind of a screening thing. If you get the value and you're transformed, you're gonna find us. You're gonna want more, you're gonna find us.
I
And
love it.
if not, then isn't that wonderful that we're not wasting your time and you're not wasting ours? So manifestmiracles.me, I know it just is gonna bring immense value.
I love that. I truly do. And for the listeners, or if you're watching us on YouTube, um, you know, I'm not saying that everybody needs to go out and change their lives, but I think it's about time that we stop being afraid to dig deep inside and say, am I in the right place? Am I doing the right things? Um, I went through a change about 3 months ago. My youngest son, who had been living at home and um, working locally, and then he decided to start looking for better opportunities, um, moved to Dallas, Texas, over 1,000 miles away. First time in 32 years that he's living any distance. And the day that he pulled out in his little green Mazda, I stood there with tears just dripping down my face. And my first thought was, I don't know if I can handle this. I don't know when I'm going to see him again. And this was right before the holidays, too. So sending him off to a strange city to be alone. Um, but what I learned from it was uh, I could exist. We found a new way of communicating, but I had to start digging deeper in myself too, realizing that when I was 21 years old, I got married and moved away from my parents, almost the same distance. And I didn't think anything of my mother crying or anything like that. But what I found was that my life now is changing. And I don't want it to be that drastic so that I lose sight of my son. And I've been finding that. And so is he in his new existence. So if you're listening, there's so many possibilities. And, check out Victoria. I'm going to take the 2-hour masterclass. Find out if it's for you. And I'm assuming you do some of this remotely, right?
Yes, most of our clients are remote. We've got 10 coaches and they cover all over the world.
How wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us. I truly appreciate it. Um, Here's hoping that peace will finally enter our lives truthfully and that your home country will continue to stand up for itself, but we will all be there to help out as well. Thank you, Victoria. You've been a delight today.
Thank
Have
you
a
so
good
much,
day.
Karen.
Bye bye now.